A little girl walked up to the tomb guard, holding a single flower in her tiny hand. Everyone thought he would ignore her. After all, his duty is to never break focus. But in that silent moment, what he did next melted hearts across the world. Stay with me until the end to see this unforgettable gesture. And if stories of honor and humanity inspire you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. To understand why this small moment between a child and a soldier touched millions, we first need to step back and appreciate the setting where it all happened. The tomb of the unknown soldier, located in Arlington National Cemetery, Virginia, is not just another monument. It is one of the most sacred places in the United States, a place where silence speaks louder than words. Established in 1921, the tomb was built to honor unidentified American soldiers who gave their lives in battle, men and women whose names we may never know, but whose sacrifices shaped the freedoms people cherish today. When you step into Arlington, the air itself feels different. The endless rows of white marble headstones stretch into the horizon, each one representing a life given in service. The atmosphere is hushed, reverent, a stillness broken only by the soft rustle of leaves, the call of a distant bird, or the solemn footsteps of visitors who come to pay their respects. And then, there is the tomb itself. A massive white sarcophagus carved with the words, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." That inscription carries a weight that words can barely capture. It is not about one man, but about all soldiers who never came home, whose names were lost to time and battlefields. The tomb is their eternal home, their silent resting place, their enduring legacy. But what makes the tomb truly extraordinary is not just the stone, it is the living presence of the Sentinels of the Guard, soldiers of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, known as the Old Guard. These men and women stand watch 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, in blistering heat, freezing snow, rainstorms, and even hurricanes. Nothing interrupts their vigil. Every step they take is deliberate. Every click of the heel is measured. The guard changes follow a ritual so precise that it almost feels like a sacred dance. 21 steps across the black mat in front of the tomb, a pause of exactly 21 seconds, then another 21 steps back. The number is symbolic, representing the 21-gun salute, the highest military honor. Visitors who gather to watch often whisper about the sense of awe it creates. Some describe it as watching time slow down. Others compare it to a prayer in motion. For many, it is the most profound display of respect they have ever seen. And it was here, in this place where silence and duty reigned supreme, that something unexpected happened. A little girl, dwarfed by the towering figure of a sentinel, decided to do something so innocent, so pure, that it would break through decades of military tradition for a fleeting moment, and in doing so, create a story that would circle the globe. The Sentinels of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier are not ordinary soldiers. They belong to the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, famously known as the Old Guard. Founded in 1784, this unit is the oldest active-duty infantry regiment in the United States Army, and its traditions run deep. But among its many missions, none are as sacred as the one carried out on the black mat in front of the tomb. Becoming a sentinel is not something a soldier simply signs up for. It is not a job. It is a calling. Only a small fraction of those who attempt it ever succeed. In fact, fewer than 700 soldiers have earned the prestigious Tomb Guard identification badge since the tradition began. To put that into perspective, more people have climbed Mount Everest than have become full-fledged Tomb Guards. The path begins with a grueling selection process. Volunteers from the Old Guard must demonstrate not only perfect military bearing, but also unwavering mental strength. They undergo weeks of testing. Their uniforms must be flawless, their movements precise, their discipline absolute. Any slip, even something as small as a scuffed shoe or a misaligned ribbon, can mean immediate dismissal from training. And then there is the memorization. Every guard is required to learn the history of Arlington, the biographies of notable figures buried there, the architecture of the tomb, and even the names and locations of thousands of graves across the cemetery. They must be ready to answer any question from visitors, not with notes, not with hesitation, but with the authority of someone who has dedicated themselves to memory and duty. Training doesn't stop there. Recruits must also master the walk, the 21 steps, the turns, the weapon maneuvers, all performed with mechanical precision. A slight stumble, a turn even a fraction of a degree off, or a pause shorter or longer than 21 seconds is enough to fail. It is not just about looking sharp, it is about embodying perfection in motion. And the discipline extends far beyond the mat. Guards live by a code. They avoid alcohol, swearing, and even public displays that might bring dishonor to the badge they wear. Their shoes are custom made, often with metal plates on the soles and heels, producing that unmistakable click that echoes across the marble plaza with each step. The sight and sound of it demand attention. It's the sound of respect carved into rhythm. Their duty never ends. No weather is too harsh. When hurricanes sweep through, when blizzards bury the East Coast, when Washington's summers climb past 100 degrees, the sentinels remain. In 2003, when Hurricane Isabel hit Virginia, Arlington officials gave the guards permission to take shelter. The guards refused. "My orders are to remain on post," one sentinel declared. And so they stayed, standing watch as the storm raged around them. For many of these guards, the greatest honor is not the uniform or even the badge, but the silent connection to those who rest beneath the marble. They are the living representatives of a promise: you will not be forgotten. It is into this atmosphere of absolute discipline that a small child suddenly wandered, carrying nothing but innocence and a single flower. The contrast could not have been greater. A soldier trained to embody centuries of honor, and a little girl too young to understand rules, only to follow her heart. It was a bright, cloudless afternoon at Arlington National Cemetery. The sun cast long shadows across the immaculate rows of headstones, each one standing like a silent sentinel of its own. Visitors moved quietly, some whispering prayers, others pausing to take photographs. The crisp air carried with it an almost sacred stillness. The kind of stillness that makes every sound sharper, every movement more profound. On the black mat in front of the tomb, the guard paced with his usual rhythm. 21 steps forward, heel click, rifle shift, 21 seconds pause, 21 steps back. His movements were flawless, so precise that they seemed almost mechanical. Every eye was on him. For many in the crowd, this was their first time witnessing the ritual. A performance of honor so disciplined that it bordered on hypnotic. But among the crowd was someone who didn't see just a soldier or just a ritual. She saw something different. A little girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old, stood near the front with her parents. Her dress was light yellow, dotted with tiny flowers that fluttered in the breeze. In her hand she clutched a single bloom, a small red carnation, its stem almost too long for her little fingers to grasp. While the adults watched in reverent silence, the girl's wide eyes followed the soldier. To her, he wasn't a distant symbol of duty. He was simply a tall man in a shining uniform who looked brave and strong. And in the innocent logic of a child, there was only one thing to do when you admire someone. You share a gift. Without a word, she stepped forward. Her parents gasped softly, reaching out as if to stop her. But she had already slipped from their grasp. The crowd shifted uneasily. At Arlington, visitors are expected to maintain strict boundaries. Children are told to stay close. No one dares cross the line between the living and the eternal watch. Yet here she was, her tiny shoes tapping against the pavement, her flower bobbing with every step. The guard continued his march. Forward, click, rifle, pause. He had not noticed her yet. Or if he had, his stone-like expression gave nothing away. Closer she came. The crowd held its breath. Some lifted their phones, sensing something extraordinary was about to happen. The little girl now stood only a few feet from the edge of the mat. Her head tilted back as she looked up at the towering figure before her. In her eyes there was no fear, only pure admiration. Then it happened. She raised her small hand, the red flower trembling slightly, and extended it toward the guard. The gesture was simple, but in that moment, it was electric. The contrast was almost surreal. a child's innocent gift against the backdrop of absolute discipline and military precision. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Would the guard break his focus? Would he ignore her as his training demanded? Or would he do the unthinkable, step outside centuries of ritual for a little girl with a flower? The air seemed to thicken, time slowing down. Cameras clicked. Parents held their breath. The world waited for the response. The world seemed to hold its breath. The little girl stood there, her tiny hand stretched upward, the crimson carnation trembling slightly in her grasp. The guard, mid-stride, came to the end of his 21 paces. He stopped, clicked his heel, shifted his rifle with the sharp, echoing precision that defined every second of his watch. For an instant it seemed as if he would simply turn and continue. The rules demanded it. Tomb guards are trained never to break focus, never to allow anything to interrupt the sanctity of their duty. They do not smile, they do not speak, they do not waver. Rain or shine, heat or snow, their mission is the same. To guard, without distraction, for all eternity. And yet, in that moment, something changed. Instead of pivoting sharply back into his march, the guard paused. His gaze, once fixed in eternal vigilance, lowered ever so slightly. Slowly, with the precision of a man balancing two worlds, his sacred duty and his shared humanity, he shifted his rifle to the opposite shoulder. It was a motion practiced 1,000 times, but here it carried a new weight. Then, in an almost imperceptible gesture, he bent just enough to extend his gloved hand. The crowd, unable to contain itself, gasped audibly. It was as though centuries of tradition had bent to meet the innocence of a child. The little girl, her face glowing with excitement, placed the flower into his waiting hand. For her, it was simple. She had given her gift. But for everyone watching, it was monumental. The guard straightened, the carnation now in his grasp. He didn't smile, he didn't speak. But there was something in the way he held himself. A subtle softening, a humanity that could not be masked by discipline. Then, with solemn grace, he turned and stepped back to the tomb. Every movement was deliberate. He approached the marble sarcophagus, immaculate under the afternoon sun, and gently laid the flower at its base. Silence. It was a silence thicker and deeper than before, the kind that makes your skin prickle, that forces your heart to slow. Even the wind seemed to hold still, as if the entire world understood the sacredness of the moment. When he returned to his post, resuming his eternal march, nothing seemed different. And yet everything was. The ritual continued. Heel click. Rifle shift. 21 steps. But now, at the base of the tomb, a small red carnation lay as a silent reminder of what had just transpired. The little girl stepped back toward her parents, her smile bright and unbothered, as though she had done nothing unusual. But the crowd around her had tears in their eyes. Some wiped their cheeks quietly. Others lowered their phones, unable to believe they had just witnessed something so rare, so beautiful. A hardened soldier had remained true to his duty. And yet, in that fleeting gesture, he had revealed that beneath the uniform, beneath the precision and the discipline, there was still a beating heart. And it was that blend, unyielding honor and undeniable humanity, that made the moment unforgettable. The carnation rested at the base of the tomb, a tiny burst of red against the smooth white marble. For a moment the world was still. The soldier resumed his march, the echo of his boots striking the stone with the same disciplined rhythm as before. But in the silence, something felt different. Everyone watching knew they had just been part of something extraordinary. Among the crowd, tears fell quietly. A middle-aged man lowered his camera, unable to look through a lens after what he had seen. "I'll never forget this," he whispered to his wife, who nodded, holding their daughter's hand tighter. Nearby, a veteran in his worn service cap stood at attention, a single tear tracing down his weathered face. He saluted, not just for the tomb, but for the nameless guard who had broken centuries of rigidity with one act of grace. Children, usually restless in such solemn places, seemed hushed. Parents crouched down to explain what they had witnessed. That soldier is showing us respect, not just to the tomb, but to kindness. In that instant, the story passed from one generation to the next, not as history, but as living memory. Then came the ripple beyond Arlington. Smartphones had captured the moment. Clips were uploaded within minutes. Onlookers posted captions like, "I just saw the impossible happen at Arlington," and "This soldier reminded us that even in duty there is humanity." The footage spread across platforms, first to local news stations, then national outlets, and soon across the globe. Comments flooded in. Veterans wrote messages of pride. "As a former guard, I know what this means. That young man carried the weight of tradition with honor." Parents shared the video with their children, using it to teach lessons about respect, compassion, and service. Ordinary viewers from countries far away admitted they had never heard of the tomb of the unknown soldier before, but this act had made them want to learn. Debates sprang up too. Some insisted the guard had broken tradition, that the rules should never bend. Others argued it was the greatest honor he could have given, placing duty and compassion side by side. Yet, regardless of stance, the conversation itself carried power. Millions of people were now talking about the tomb, about sacrifice, about the humanity of soldiers who stand silent day and night for those who cannot speak for themselves. News anchors replayed the moment with solemn commentary. Radio hosts described it as a crack in stone, showing the heart inside. Comment sections overflowed with stories of soldiers, of sacrifices, of loved ones never returned home. The little girl's flower had become more than a gesture. It had become a spark. In classrooms, teachers showed the clip to students during history lessons. In churches, pastors referenced it as an example of humility and kindness. On social media, it became a symbol of hope, that even in places built on discipline and silence, compassion could bloom. And all the while the guard himself, whose name was not released, who likely preferred it that way, went back to his duty, silent, steadfast, unchanged on the outside. He had not sought recognition, nor fame, nor headlines. He had only responded in the moment, balancing his sacred task with the humanity within him. But for those who witnessed it, both in person and across the world, that single action turned into something enduring. A reminder that rituals, no matter how unyielding, gain their deepest meaning when touched by kindness. The carnation would wither and fade, as all flowers do. Yet the memory of that day, of a soldier pausing, bending, and honoring a child's gift, would remain fresh in the hearts of millions. At first glance, what happened at Arlington that day might seem small. A little girl held out a flower. A soldier accepted it. Just a fleeting exchange of kindness. Yet beneath that simple act lies a message so profound that it has continued to echo long after the moment itself ended. The tomb of the unknown soldier represents sacrifice without recognition. Each soldier buried there gave everything, yet their names are lost to time. The guards who stand watch embody silence, duty, and unwavering commitment, never speaking, never reacting, never stepping outside their ritual. For decades, their purpose has been to remain unshaken, like the stone they march upon. And so, when a guard bends to accept a flower from a child, the meaning is layered. It is not the breaking of duty, it is the fulfillment of it. Because what is the tomb, if not a reminder of humanity's cost in war? What is the vigil, if not a promise that sacrifice will be remembered, honoured, and humanised? By acknowledging that child's flower, the soldier reminded everyone that the tomb is not just a monument of stone, it is a monument of hearts. Think of what the girl represents. Innocence, hope, the future. She had no knowledge of military protocols or sacred rituals. She only knew how to show love in the way a child can, by offering something beautiful. The soldier's acceptance bridged two worlds, the structured discipline of the military and the pure kindness of civilian life. In that instant, both found common ground and respect. The world saw something extraordinary in that brief pause. For veterans, it was a reassurance that their sacrifices were not in vain. For parents, it was a lesson they could point to, that compassion has power. For everyday viewers, it was a reminder that the uniforms and rituals of soldiers, as strict as they may seem, are still worn by human beings, men and women but hearts capable of kindness. This moment mattered, because it transformed silence into speech. The guard never spoke a word, yet his gesture shouted louder than any anthem. It said, "This matters, you matter. Every act of remembrance matters." It also highlighted a truth often forgotten, that respect is not rigid, but living. Tradition endures not because it never changes, but because it adapts just enough to remain meaningful. If the guard had refused the flower, the ritual would still be intact, yes. But in choosing to accept it, the ritual became alive. It reminded us that remembrance is not mechanical. It breathes, it feels, it connects across generations. And perhaps most importantly, it mattered because it spread beyond that one moment. The story did not stay within Arlington's gates. It travelled across screens, into homes, into hearts. It sparked conversations not just about soldiers and wars, but about kindness itself. In a world often divided by anger and noise, this act reminded us that humanity still exists, even in the most solemn of places. The guard's action will not be written into military manuals. It will not alter the official protocols of the tomb, but it will live on in memory, as a rare glimpse of how discipline and compassion can coexist. And in that coexistence lies the heart of true honor. So yes, this moment mattered, not only because it touched those present, but because it continues to touch us all, even now. A single flower became a symbol, carried far beyond the marble steps of Arlington.